What's up, people? Sam here with Game Plan T1D. I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. I was able to sit down with Phil Southerland. Phil's accomplishments are seemingly unending, so I'll list just a few here. Phil is the CEO and co-founder of Team Novo Nordisk, formerly Team Type 1, a cycling and athletic team comprised of an entirely diabetic roster. Phil was a successful professional cyclist and part of the victorious Race Across America cycling team. Phil is a global diabetes ambassador and philanthropist, and you can read about Phil's life in greater detail in his autobiography, Not Dead Yet. All of these accomplishments occurred after Phil's T1D diagnosis at just 7 months old, at which point many doctors told Phil's family that he wouldn't live past 25 years old, and that if he did, he'd suffer severe complications like blindness. Clearly, Phil has defeated those doubts, and for that, the T1D community is and will be forever grateful. Please enjoy my conversation with Phil Southerland. Welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Benger. On this podcast, we explore the lives of athletes living with T1D to try to uncover what it is that allows them to excel despite their diabetes. Today on the show, I am very lucky to be joined by Phil Southerland. Phil, how are you doing?
Doing great, Sam. How are you today?
Doing very well. So your journey as a diabetic athlete and really as a diabetes ambassador is so sprawling that I think the best place to begin this conversation is at the point of your diagnosis and really your childhood. So as some people may know, you were diagnosed extremely early at just 7 months old. So I wanted to talk to you about growing up in Florida. You were able to overcome sort of numerous expectations claiming that you'd be dead by 25 years old. So what was the mindset for you from a young age that empowered you to battle through those doubts?
Well, I think I was diagnosed in 1982. So let's put it in context. There were no blood glucose testing supplies. It was human insulin at the time. And, my parents had to check my glucose by squeezing urine out of my diaper onto a test strip to find out where I was 2 hours, 4 hours in arrears. So, it was a difficult time for people with diabetes there. That was a time where it wasn't if you get complications, but when you get complications. Mm-hmm. This technology was horrible. The treatment was archaic. And, there'd never been a kid diagnosed at 7 months old before. There probably had been children at 7 months of age that had died because, that's nearly what happened to me. But, my parents got, the devastating news that your kid's going to be dead by 25, and if not, he's blind. But then they did a really good job of isolating me from that belief. I was never allowed to use diabetes as an excuse. My parents, and once glucose testing became available, after probably 6-8 months after I was diagnosed, they started to realize that when I was moving a lot, my insulin worked better, my numbers were better, and they compared my numbers to their numbers and said, well, let's try to keep his as close to non-diabetic as possible. And exercise has been, a big role of that since I could crawl, since I could walk, since I could run. Everything I've ever done in life, I've done it with diabetes. And sport at a young age became a big part of my life. It was swimming, football, baseball, basketball, soccer, everything a regular kid would play. And early on in the sporting ventures, I found that if my glucose was low, my glucose was too high, then I didn't perform to my best of my capacity. So I had to develop a lot of systems early on. Again, and this is in the human insulin days, but my life was extremely regimented. It was shots at the same time, 7 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, 7 at night, 9 at night, every single day. And then meals were the exact same time. Exercise or practice was at the same time. And we just worked my nutrition and insulin around what I was doing in sport. I guess I was blessed with a gene to want to win. I've been competitive my whole life. I'm still extremely competitive, and I think that drive to win makes the management of diabetes easy, because if you want to win in life, then you have to manage diabetes. And that's the attitude I've carried the whole way through life, and that's the attitude I'm trying to pass on to the younger athletes on Team Novo Nordisk and Team Type 1. And so everyone's got issues, but diabetes is an issue that for the most part, when you can afford your medicine, your insulin, and with access to CGM, the sky is the limit of what's possible with diabetes today.
Absolutely. So we'll get into how sports sort of positively impacted your journey as a diabetic athlete and how it has the capacity to do that for other people. But I wanted to get, what is your reaction now looking back on your childhood at the state of that, you described it, sort of archaic diabetes management technology. Obviously today, a lot of athletes are on CGMs that are, reading every 5 minutes what their number is and what their blood sugar level is to their phone. And going back to what you described was the situation at the point of your diagnosis, are you shocked at how you were able to manage your diabetes despite those challenges?
I would say shocked. But it's kind of, I'm glad I made it through. I'm glad that I didn't do one additional unit at some point as a kid and die in the middle of the night. We had a lot of seizures back then. I still remember every year I'd get the flu, once a year, every 2 years, and have to go in the hospital and get that huge, enormous IV needle, which that was the only thing that scared me. But I dealt with what I had to overcome at the time. And I think that's what I had to do. Gary Hall Jr. had to do it. Many others did as well. But when it comes to the regimen and the discipline needed to kind of eat the right things, not stray off the path, it was a great lesson. Incredible lessons in discipline at a young age that no one else got the privilege to have. And I say this as a privilege because I had great endocrinologists. I had a great support system around me. With all of those things combined, diabetes has been a privilege for me. It could have been far different had any one of those pieces not been in place. But when you look at the system back then, I just remember when I was on the bike, or competing at all, if I thought about sugar, or if I thought, what's my blood sugar, my safety net was just to eat. And so that was my system when I came in top 10 in the national championships as a junior, top 10 in national championships as an S-bar, and races I lost. It was my system was, if I think I need to eat, I eat, and if I think I need to drink, drink. But there were definitely a lot of mistakes, but I tried to make those mistakes in practice versus competition.
Certainly. And I think, Phil, you highlighted a really important point. I think at the time of your diagnosis with the technology, leaps and bounds behind what it is today, you were forced to rely on other preventative measures to maintain a really solid blood sugar level in exercising and having a regimented diet. Do you think some of those things are neglected today because we have such advanced technology that people
absolutely
aren't embracing exercise and fitness and diet as much as they should be?
You just look, it's the type 1 population is living in the same world as the rest of the world. And that means access to anything at a moment's notice. And now, I think one of the biggest mistakes out there is, kids think, or parents think, my kid has an insulin pump, so they can eat anything, and let them ravage of junk food and Cokes and Snickers and, all stuff that's all okay in moderation. But just because you can push a button or just because you can give an injection and eat something doesn't mean you should eat it. A healthy way of life is exponentially more important for a type 1 diabetic than it is for a normal person. It has immediate consequence. And I think people need, with diabetes especially, all of society, they need to be healthier. They need to be more active. We need to be more conscious of doing the right things from a nutritional standpoint, from an exercise standpoint, from a health standpoint. When you do all of those, then diabetes quickly becomes, I wouldn't say easy, but a lot easier to be successful at.
Yeah, I think it's easy to fret and worry and get anxious about, which insulin pump should I use, which CGM should I use, and these things are costly, and as you mentioned, they're not always easily accessible. But at the same time, a diabetic can go out and walk or cycle or run for an hour a day, and that's going to have massive impacts in terms of stabilizing their blood sugar. And it's cost effective too, and it's much more easily accessible. So talking about the beginning of your story as an athlete, obviously a large part of your story is intertwined with cycling. Having recently just finished your book, it was really an amazing thing to see how your passion for cycling grew and eventually became sort of a tool with which you could control your diabetes. And you mentioned Snickers earlier, and I thought that was kind of a funny anecdote in the story, how you'd be cycling for a while and you'd kind of start to feel a little bit shaky and you're like, all right, I've earned that Snickers. So talk to us about how your passion for cycling really started to manifest.
Yeah, I mean, when I learned to ride a bike, I loved to ride a bike, and it became one of the things that I used to get to my friend's house, escape the house, go explore the neighborhood. But when I was 12, I got introduced to a beautiful, tasty poison of a Snickers bar, and not a poison. It was delicious then. It's still delicious today. Nothing has changed about a Snickers bar in 24 years. But I ate a candy bar at school, for the first time. My blood sugar when I got home was over 300. I knew that was bad. That could cause me to go blind. And so, I kind of, and at the time with the human insulin, it took 2 hours to kick in. I at 12 years old, and today, for that matter, I didn't have the patience to wait for insulin to work to eat that candy bar. Mm-hmm. But I found if I rode my bike to the gas station, which was 2 miles away from my house, I'd stop, get a Snickers bar, eat it, and then go ride until my legs hurt, or till and I was either done riding, or I'd stop at another gas station, get another Snickers bar, and then keep riding. And it was really, I started riding to eat junk food, and then, as time went on, I was eating junk food so that I could ride longer and longer. And it wasn't until 16, 17 years old, and my brothers at the bike shop, the guys who raised me, essentially, said, Phil, if you want to seriously be competitive in cycling, then you got to quit eating that stuff and go buy this gel or that bar or this, that, or the other. And my nutrition on the bike began to shift, and my focus on victory really tightened up.
Yeah, Snickers only diet can only power you so far.
I mean, it was at the time I was a kid and I wanted to eat that candy bar. I had diabetes and I found a way to do it. And for me, that was the bike. That's the cool part, is that, and I think it's a lesson that still in today's age, it's when it's cold in the winter months and I get the chance to go on some long bike rides, I still go back to being a 12-year-old kid and eating a candy bar so I can do so. So it's just, and I tell people today, if you want to do something, it's all about just planning accordingly. And today's age, you can do anything you want with diabetes. You just got to have the right stuff around you to do so.
So speaking on that topic of planning and being strategic, talk to us about how you started to sort of push the boundaries on the bike. So from your story and from your book, I understand you started out on the mountain bike, eventually transitioned to a road bike. But talk to us about some of those first really challenging races. I know in the book you mentioned you did a 12-hour race where you were racing through the night and then eventually all the way to race across America. But talk to us about how you started to sort of push those boundaries and how you managed to keep a consistent level of blood sugar sort of throughout that growing process.
Good question. So I've kind of always liked doing big things that people said, I couldn't do. Doubt has been a big fueler of all the innovation that we've created over the years. Is that when people said you can't do something, I had a chip on my shoulder or whatnot, but I had to prove them wrong. And that 12-hour race was that was a really big moment for me because 5 months prior, some guy had said, there's no way you can do that. And I said, I'll do a 12-hour race. You can't do it. And then I said, let's bet. And the guy bet me $100. I didn't have $100, but I wasn't going to lose, so it didn't matter. And so that was something I decided to do. I trained probably the wrong way. I probably overtrained to get ready for it, but I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time. And I was able to do that race. And it was a big race. I was the first kid under 18 to have ever done it. And I had a good strategy going in from fueling, nutrition, got a little jacked up. I remember seeing my blood sugar over 400 at one point in the race. Had to give a unit of insulin. Then I was a little bit on the lower side the next lap, so I just ate more food. But this is a race you could stop in the pits, recharge yourself, take a breather for a sec, and then get back out there. Mm-hmm. And I just kept it steady the whole day. And one guy who was the top 12-hour racer, at least in the Southeast at the time, he killed me. Then there's a second place guy who was not so far ahead, and then on my last lap, I caught him, I passed him, and this was without a light, racing through the single track trails in Ocala, Florida, at night, and my light was dead, so they stopped me. No one had a replacement light for me, and this guy, John Morehouse, came through. He still had battery, and he went out for another lap, and I watched my second place right away, and I got third. But for me, I was devastated because I thought, man, I could have been second. But then as the next week when I went into the bike shop, I was like a superhero to those guys. They were all really proud, really impressed. I validated my belonging in the sport. And then it was, hey, there's a road race next weekend. Give it a try. I did. I got third place. I made $20, which was enough for gas, for food. And I had $5 left at the end, which was glorious. I was like, I can make money on the bike. Sure, why not? And then it went on. I always felt I had to train more than the others, train harder than the others, work harder than the others, and I did. And that went on for years. If my coach said do 3 hours, I did 3 hours. If he said 5 hours, I did 5 hours. Never more, never less, just always, according to the program. And I'll give credit to the success of the discipline I had at the time. It was an unwavering discipline, a very selfish discipline that probably didn't do much for my social life in high school, didn't do much for anyone but me. But and that's something I somewhat regret, that it was too self-focused at the time. But it was all kind of part of the journey. And the bike led me to a lot of fun. It led me to a lot of success. And then in my first senior year in college, I met Joe, and he became my first friend with diabetes at 21 years old. And then that's when the bike began to have purpose. And I'd say when I met Joe, when I helped him get motivated to take control of his diabetes, then all of a sudden the bike had a true meaning in life. And it was like, I can use the bike not just to help myself win races, get glory or whatever it is that a kid is searching for, but I could use the bike to help other people get motivated to take control, get other people motivated to pursue their dreams, and hopefully in some time we'll get to the Tour de France and unify the diabetes world. And so that was an important transition moment in college. And then the Race Across America was just, again, another crazy idea that everyone I told we were going to do it said, no way, not possible. First, you can't raise the money. Raise the money. Can't find the bike sponsors. Found the bike sponsors. Can't actually compete in the event. And our sponsors at Abbott Diabetes Care at the time, they gave us the money to do it. We were on trials with the Freestyle Navigator at the time, which is now the Libre, and they didn't think we could do it, so they didn't invest anything in the PR effort around it. Because they were worried we were going to quit or not be able to finish because of diabetes, and we got second place, and they said, wow, you actually did it. I said, yeah, I said we were going to do it. And they said, okay, we're in for more next year. We want to make it bigger. We really want the world to see. And that was kind of the beginning. It wasn't, some would say the Race Across America was the beginning of the journey, but I'd say the finish, the fact that we did so well that first year, as a team of diabetic athletes, that is what was proof of the pudding that allowed us to kind of set bigger goals, kind of led us to where we are today.
Yeah, I think sports is, and as you've found with cycling, such an important platform in terms of advocacy for diabetes and just showing what can be done. But I did want to dive into a bit more of the details behind Race Across America and what were some of the highs and lows of committing to just such an endeavor. It's a 3,000-mile relay race across the United States. And, talk to us about when that idea first popped into your head, and then also just some of the high moments and low moments of that race.
Yeah, so the idea was actually, it was formulated at a JDRF Ride to Cure. I gave, this is like May 18th, 2005, I gave my first public speech. I was going out to do the JDRF Ride to Cure in Carmel, California. Somehow I was asked to speak to the crowd the night before. I did. I told the story of Joe and I's blood glucose competitions. We came in first and second in the charity ride. And people are like, so what's your sugar? Who's going to buy dinner? And one of us was 88, the other was 89. I don't remember who. And plus, dinner was free that night. Mm-hmm. But we were sitting there having some celebratory beers after the ride. And someone said, you guys really, there's something to this Team Type 1. I was 5 months into existence at the time. You guys got to do something big. Ride your bikes across America. And I had just graduated college. I had a mountain of debt, which I had to work to pay off. I'm thinking, I don't have a month to ride my bike across the country, but the race across America, we could do that. So we agreed that night, 4 of us, to have an all-diabetic race team get across the country. I then did some more research and saw that there was an 8-person team, looked at the records, and thought we can beat that, and we set out to do so. The original 2 of the 4 who, over beers, agreed, unfortunately had to withdraw themselves. Then I got some press via buddy Jared Gruber, who's now one of the cycling's best well-known photographers. He wrote a piece in Pez Cycling News for me back in May of 2005, and I got contacted by, 6 other Type 1 athletes who had interest to do the race across America. So put the team together, and that was the easy part. Then phase 2 was the bike sponsorship, and that was just, I was 23 years old at this Interbike conference, and if people in the diabetes world are listening, it's like the ADA or the EASD, which is going on right now, of cycling. Mm-hmm. And I went out there in a suit and a tie, 120 proposals, and I walked around the entire trade show looking for sponsorship. 99% of people said, yes, we'd be delighted to sponsor, and 98% of people did not return my phone calls or emails the following week. But it was all part of the journey. And we ended up, by December, I'd locked down cycling sponsors, I'd locked down helmets, glasses, clothing, partnership from the Weather Channel, documentary channel for this race across America, but we still had no money. And I was on a navigator trial with my doctor, Bruce Bodie, and I said, Bruce, this is what we need to race across the country successfully. It was the first time I'd had CGM data during exercise in all my life, and I learned more in the first 2 days on a CGM about my diabetes than I'd learned in 24 years. It blew my mind what was happening to my sugar on a minute-by-minute basis. And it enabled me to get a whole lot better, a lot faster. And I said, we have to have this. So Bruce called Holly Culp, who's still Holly McGarrett now, dear friend. I met her and her husband, Jeff, after making the big pitch at Abbott. And there were a lot of heads nodding. But, it was a product that was not yet FDA approved. They had no launch. Well, they had a launch plan, but approval had to happen. And, Holly gave me the tough news at dinner that it was going to be like finding a needle in a haystack to get the money mobilized at this point in the year. Mm-hmm. And she said, but Jeff and I have done very well in our lives, and we feel this is important. So if we can't find the money within the company, then we'll write you a personal check, and this needs to happen for people with diabetes. And I cried at the dinner table that night when she told me. I was like, I wrote to everyone on the team. I said, guess what? We have the money. And that was that. The training began, and then we had the 8 riders, and then we crewed ourselves the first year, and we had 36 volunteers, 36 people who gave up 10 days in the summertime to come go 23 miles an hour across the country. And it was huge thanks to all of them, family, friends, just random volunteers showed up to help us make this dream come true. It was a little bit too many people. We were chaotic. We'd never done this before, so there were a ton of mistakes made. But it was just a priceless experience that I'll never forget, and something I think doing that for the first time was just such a major win for people with diabetes all over the world. We didn't have social media back then. It was a word of mouth kind of thing, but the word had begun to spread, and I think that then empowered a lot of other diabetes organizations to start, people with diabetes to start advocacy organizations, and Team Type 1 doing that in 2006 just changed the world of diabetes forever. And I'm proud of my teammates, 4 of which we still stay in touch, 4 of which, unfortunately, there was a divide in the team that first year, and I regret that I'm not in touch with the other 4 on a regular basis because they were part of that change for sure.
It's an amazing accomplishment, and I wanted to ask you, it almost sounds like there was a race across America just to get the team funded and get the team together. Was it it almost appears that the race was almost an afterthought at that point. What was it like finally getting on the bike after all of the hard work that went into setting up the team and getting it funded?
I mean, I remember the very first pull that I got to do for the team, and it was hard. The first moment of the race at 3:00 in the afternoon, and it was a 4-mile climb. I got stung by a bee. My head or somewhere on it went in my helmet, stung me, but my heart rate was 175 beats a minute, and we said 3,000 miles to go. It was miserable. That first climb, it was a miserable start to the race. But then I got in the van, and that's what Race Across America was. It was, you go ride your bike as hard as you can for 15 minutes, then you get in a van and your friends make fun of you, you make fun of your friends, and then it's just, copy paste for 8 hours. Then you get off, and it's a different set of people making fun of you, giving you food, taking care of you, nutrition, sleep, all that stuff. Then you wake up some point in the middle of the night, and then get back on the bike, do it again. And this repeated itself over and over and over for 5 days, 16 hours and 4 minutes that first year. But it was a difficult start. But the fact that we were starting the race for Team Type 1 was a dream come true. It hurt like hell, but it was a dream in the making.
Certainly worth all the pain. And I think what's perhaps even more compelling than just the pure physical exertion is sort of the guiding vision behind the founding of Team Type 1. As you mentioned, Joe Eldridge was a co-founder in that initiative, but I thought a really cool anecdote from your book, Not Dead Yet, was when you were doing fundraising while you were still at University of Georgia, I believe, and you were at a Starbucks. I could be getting some of the details wrong,
yeah.
But essentially you were asked, what would you do if you had $400 right now? And you were able to speak sort of concisely and to the point about what the guiding vision of Team Type 1 would be and what you guys would do as a platform for advocacy, for inspiration, for other Type 1 diabetics. Talk to us about what that experience was like and what the really driving vision for Team Type 1 was and is.
Yeah, I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was February 22nd, 2005. I'm actually in my office looking at the framed picture of those 4 Ben Franklins that I'll always keep in my office. And that was part of the survey. Team Type 1 was still in the idea mode at that time, but I had to go out as part of a business plan class project for my management class and ask people, if this company existed, would you buy the product? Would you invest in it? Would you support it? And I had to ask at least 10 people, and I'd gotten some yeses. We support JDRF. No, we support cancer organizations. No, we support, Christ. Please, So I got a mixed bag of reactions of would people like to be a part of Team Type 1. Well, then I spent 15 minutes talking to a business professor he taught MBA students at University of Michigan, who happened to be at that Starbucks at the Mall of Georgia in February. And then I came to this guy who, with the last one I'd expect to be a supporter, he was wearing jeans, a T-shirt, glasses, smoking a cigarette, coffee in one hand, and a small gap in his teeth, balding head. And I said, and I explained, we're going to use the bike as a platform. We're going to inspire people with diabetes to take better control. We're going to try to unify the diabetes community through sport, and then ensure that we can all have equal access to medicine going forward. And the guy said, there's something to this. What would you do with $400? And at the time, I was working my way through school and racing, selling T-shirts and business cards. I was, the vice president of marketing, which was a really cool business card to have in college. But I was the VP of marketing for LS Designs, and I said, well, if I had $400, I'd buy 100 T-shirts, and I'd buy business cards that have our website on it, and use those as to start the awareness campaign. And the guy took out $400, and he said, "Go start your company, kid." And I said, "I can't take money. This is a class project. It's not. I'm not officially looking for investors at this point." He said, "You need to start this, and you need to start it now." And he put $400 and put his coffee cup on top. He said, "Go start your business now, or someone else can have a good day at Starbucks." So I took the money. We exchanged contact info. Daniel Hopkins was his name. I got his email, dhopkins@bellsouth.net. Got his phone number. He got mine. Life went on. So I drove straight from there, Starbucks, to Bank of America. My banker's name was Harry Binko. I don't remember anyone's name now, but I remember my banker from February 22nd, 2005. Harry Binko, at 3:50, I walked in the bank. By 4:15, the bank had closed, but he got my account started with Team Type 1. I drove straight to my office. I said, I need 100 T-shirts. Jane Meredith was her name. She did the designs. And my boss, Mark Czaplinski, agreed to give us the shirts at $3 a pop and business cards at $50. So after tax, on day one of operations, I'd raised $400. I'd spent $387, and I was hoping these T-shirts looked good so I could keep the company going. So that was, it was just, again, I knew people needed help. I didn't know what type of help. I had no idea what the challenges on a global scale were, but I knew from the few people I met with and spoke with diabetes that people were lacking heroes. They were lacking a daily dose of inspiration, and a lot of them were struggling to afford their medicine. So we needed change, and there wasn't anything. Diabetes was at that time was doom and gloom. You're going to go blind from diabetes. You can't do this. You can't do that. There was no one kind of leading the charge of what you can and what you can do and how big you can do it with diabetes. And that's all I wanted at the time. I wanted to use the bike as a platform to help people realize they could. And I confess that it's far outgrown my wildest expectations as a 23-year-old. But I've got a lot more expectations that now today that I hope we can wildly outgrow some years down the road.
I think it's so refreshing to see a story like that where, just random good happens to good people.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So here's the cool part. The best part about that, not the best. So, being the good steward at the time, I sent the next morning, I sent Daniel Hopkins an email to say, thank you. Well, that email bounced back, and I sent to every version of Daniel Hopkins at Bell South that there could be. Never got through. Called the phone number he gave me, and it was, I don't know if you remember the number, this number does not exist. Please hang up and try again. Yeah, and I'm thinking, I went and got an Atlanta phone book because he said he did construction in Atlanta. I looked up every Daniel Hopkins. I called every single one of them. Never found the guy. And so Daniel Hopkins is the essence of an angel investor. I mean, this guy is an angel investor. I've never been able to find him since. And I'd love to say thanks because he was right. I did need that investment at the time, and a lot of good is we've raised. It'll be $100 million we'll hit this year since that moment he gave me those first $400.
Wow. And he probably had a disguise on too, because that's pure altruism. He
Yeah,
could.
it was.
Wow.
It was. I'm still. I remember those moments vividly, like it was yesterday, and I'm very grateful that we had that. Better lucky than good sometimes, right? And right place, right time, and just happened to work out.
So Phil, you mentioned $400 to now coming up on $100 million in funds raised for T1D. What has it been like seeing the evolution of this team, of this vision, of this dream? And as you mentioned, growing into Team Novo Nordisk, where you have cyclists, triathletes, and runners as well, now all performing sort of under that uniting force of T1D and showing people what can be done with T1D.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot has changed and a lot's remained the same. There's still a vision to change the world, still a vision to unite people with diabetes. I'm a little older, which comes with experience, but also can jade your mind a little bit. And so I love having these conversations where you bring me back to when it started, because I look to when it started. It was I was a kid who was going to do it, and it was going to do it because it had to be done, and it was the right thing for people with diabetes. And I need reminders of that from time to time to bring it back to day one, to have that attitude of it needs to happen, so we have to do it. Doesn't matter what anyone says, doesn't matter what the circumstances are, it's got to be done. And so I look to we won bike races. First, it was racing across America, which people said we couldn't do. Then it was winning the race across America, which year one to year two, year one we were the charity case of the race. People saying, congratulations, good luck, we love what you're doing for charity. And I was saying, well, we're here to win. And people kind of patted me on the shoulder saying, oh, that's nice, young man. That's really good. Congratulations on being so optimistic. But no one had ever seen a diabetic do an event like this, let alone a team of diabetics. So fast forward to the second year, we show up and everyone was scared of the diabetic team, right? It was, they were afraid of us because we were there to win, and when we did, we're going to race on the professional level. That's impossible. And then we did it. And then people were scared of the diabetic team, Team Type 1, to then from 2012, where we were the 25th ranked team in the world, we were the diabetes team according to all of professional cycling, on the verge of Giro d'Italia, Tour de France imitations, which is going to globalize hope for people with diabetes, to the chance to partner with Novo Nordisk and create an all-diabetic team, go back to our roots, as Jakob said to me back then. And we did. And then people said, there's no way an all-diabetic team can compete. And mind you, it was a big struggle to do so at first. But we've now become fierce competitors in the peloton in every race we do around the world. And on the in-between, we've changed. I met my wife in Macedonia. She changed the diabetes policy there in a matter of months, working for the Ministry of Health, and ensured every type 1 diabetic had 6 to 15 test strips a day, basal bolus insulin pumps covered 100% by the government. It's to think that, this little country of Macedonia, which struggles financially, but they put up the funds and the fight for their people to ensure they had the best-in-class insulin with not 1 cent of copay to the people who needed it. It's a country that takes care of their people, to helping in Rwanda and other developing countries around the world where we've ensured people have access to glucose testing, and governments who are invested, at least emotionally, in diabetes for the first time, having world leaders see people with diabetes as champions means that we can be a work-capable population and a population worth investing in. A healthy diabetic is a powerful citizen because they can do so much more than so many others. But a diabetic without access to insulin, without access to glucose testing supplies or CGMs, we can be troublemakers, and no one will ever understand how hard it is to live a life where you can barely afford your insulin, where you can barely afford oxygen. And in this day and age, that's becoming a big problem, and it's something that we have to work with the companies to change. So I don't know. It's been a great journey to grow our platform, to grow our voice, and we solved for the problem that needed to be solved for back then, which was we need heroes. And Team Type 1, I give 100 college scholarships now to NCAA athletes with Type 1 trying to generate that next group of change agents. That's part of my hero factory over there. We've got the hero factory at Team Novo Nordisk with our development team, our professional team, just ensuring that no matter where you are in the world, when you get diagnosed with diabetes or if you have diabetes and need a hero, you've got one, and our athletes. But now there's a different problem that needs solved for, and that's accessibility to insulin. That's accessibility to the insulin you want for a price that you can afford. And that's different for everybody. And that's kind of the new challenge of the day, and it's one that has to be solved for, and that's my next challenge to tackle. So I think it's, you asked me about life with diabetes way back when on the archaic insulins, and I think what I said then was I did the best that I could with what I had at the time, and I think now I have to apply that to where we are as a business and a company now. It's what is the greatest need? What is the biggest challenge that's going to benefit the most people with diabetes, and how do we solve for that? And so it's great to be able to think in much broader stroke pictures that can have far more reaching impact than we were able to at the beginning. At the beginning, it was one change in the lives for people with diabetes, one person at a time, one handshake at a time, one conversation at a time. And now we can just do things we still have that grassroots impact, amongst all of our different athletes all over the world, but we can also have broader reaching governmental changes that can impact populations at a time. And that's a cool feeling. But it also, I know what the problems are out there. I know how we can solve for them. It's about bringing people together to solve for them so people with diabetes can live better lives, can live more empowered lives, and then still be inspired to dream big.
Certainly. And I think what's perhaps a really interesting observation is sort of a commonality in your identity where you're always trying to push to sort of that next, you're kind of pushing the envelope on the bike from a young age, and then with racing across America, and just continually setting goals now from an advocacy and diabetes ambassador standpoint that are, again, sort of within that common thread of always pushing the envelope. And I did want to talk, you addressed it already, but in perhaps a little bit more detail about some of the ambassador work you're doing abroad. You mentioned Rwanda. What was the process like in trying to improve accessibility to insulin and glucose meters in Rwanda, and what was sort of the driving vision for that project?
In 2009, I went to my first EASD, which is the biggest European diabetes conference. 17,000 people were in Vienna, and I was trying to get Team Type 1 launched into Europe, saying, we can just inspire people, educate people, empower people with diabetes to take control. And then the president of the IDF at the time, Martin Slinik, I approached him and I said, hey, here's what we're doing. He goes, did you know that for $10 million, we could ensure every person with diabetes in the world had insulin? I said, they don't. And, I was just this naive kid coming from America where everything's great all the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, people are dying because they don't have access to medicine. And I said, huh? And I said, but I check 20 times a day. I get 10 injections a day, every day. He said, yeah, but there's many in the world who don't. Many in the world who don't make it. Average life expectancy for a kid with diabetes in developing countries is 7 months. And I said, excuse me? I guess, 27 at the time. I said, I've lived 27 years, no complications. He goes, yeah, but for most of the world, that's not the case. And that became a hyper focus of mine. I went on a 2-week backpacking trip in Europe by myself, just hopping on trains, staying in hostels, exploring Europe. But all I could think about was, there's kids dying because they don't have access to insulin. This is BS. It's got to change. And 2 months later, I'm in Montreal at an IDF Congress, and I met a kid, Francois Gishoma from Rwanda. And I said, Francois, I've heard about this Tour of Rwanda bike race, and I'd like to bring a diabetic team to come compete. Could we work with you on that? And he said, oh yes, that'd be nice, very inspiring for my patients. I said, do you struggle with access for testing supplies? He said, yes. And I said, what if I could bring blood glucose testing supplies for all the people in your clinic, and bring whatever supplies we could bring together to give to you? And Francois, who's in his late 50s at the time, got on his hands and knees with tears in his eyes, said, "Please come, my children need you, my children need you." And so that's, seeing that need just for me was inspiring. It's like, okay, we can help. So I brought 400 blood glucose meters, 37,000 test strips, hodgepodge of other stuff. I nearly bankrupted Team Type 1 in 2010 to do this trip, but I knew it needed to be done. We finished that year with $428 in the bank account, and I hadn't taken a paycheck in 2 months because we had to make ends meet. But going there the first time and seeing that these kids wanted to take control of their diabetes, but all the diabetics in the country had stunted growth. They had A1Cs over 14, because they had access to insulin some months, not other months. None of them had blood glucose meters. I'm giving out these meters to the kids and the families, and the kids are happy because they have a toy, and that's cool, especially in the developing world. But the parents had tears in their eyes because for the first time in their lives, they believed that their children could live. And I knew we had to change this mindset. And once you go, then you can't not go a second time. I realized that, wow, when you do the math, it's like 37,000 test strips. It sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about 400 people, it's not going to last that long. So I found ways to, for the next year, I smuggled in bike boxes another 250,000 test strips, and then being a Mzungo, which is what they call the white man in Rwanda. Being a Mzungo, I've quickly worked my way to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health. That's the number 2 position, essentially. And, she said, "I want to take care of diabetics, but I have no money." And I said, and she said, "The prices are too high, and I don't have money for diabetes." That's where I saw, wait, this is crazy. Here she wants to help, but it's just public resource that's preventing her from helping people with diabetes. And I kept pushing her. The next year I met my wife, as I said, Bilyana Georgieva at the time, who was leading the national program for diabetes in Macedonia. And I saw how quickly a motivated person in government could change the landscape for a country. And then I introduced Bilyana to Agnes in Rwanda, and quickly those two formed out a memorandum of understanding. We made it official. Team Type 1 was now a partner of the government, and we went on to become the official blood glucose supplier for the country. And that's still the case today. But Agnes began to become motivated for diabetes. We helped bring funding into the country through the World Diabetes Foundation. And now there's diabetes healthcare infrastructure for the entire country of Rwanda. We've got the Minister of Health focused on the disease, fighting for resources so that she can have money to care for her people. Insulin is on the formulary for the government insurance, which means there's now affordable insulin for every person with diabetes in Rwanda. And we're getting blood glucose monitoring supplies added to the formulary as well. So, for me, it feels great, but it's taken 8 years of effort, countless trips to the country, and advocating all over the world to make this happen. And I'm super proud that it's been done, but I know it could have all been done quicker if there was just public money available for diabetes, for the NCDs as they're called, because we're one of the big 4 NCDs: diabetes, cancer, cardiac, and then pulmonary, lung something or other. Mm-hmm. Those diseases account for a large portion of the deaths from disease in the world. Yet there's about $240 million of public funding a year for those diseases in the developing world. That's crazy. In Rwanda, there's $22 million from PEPFAR allocated to HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, but zero for diabetes. And it's just, you can look at it from 2 ways. There's big problems when it comes to diabetes on a global basis. America is the new Africa when it comes to insulin and affordability, but it's also a big opportunity to create change that's going to make the lives of people with diabetes better. And I don't look at problems as problems. I look at them as opportunities for solutions. And we need a lot more solutions on a global scale before we truly see the power of people with diabetes, on a continual basis. Because right now it's a tough world out there. things need to change because there's great medicine, there's great insulins out there. The continuous monitors are phenomenal. When you have these tools, life with diabetes it's just life. But when any one of these tools goes missing, then diabetes can begin to rear its ugly head as a pain in the ass again. And we want to stop that from happening for everyone in the world on a sustainable basis.
Yeah, I think perhaps one of the more tragic things, as you touched on, is the fact that we have such a discrepancy in terms of care in the United States, where we have people on CGMs, and it's really, a life where you're not going to expect to encounter major complications, but then you go across the pond, you go to, sub-Saharan Africa, you go to India, you go to places in the developing world, and as you mentioned, this is a death sentence in type 1 diabetes, and the fact that we have that care available, and it's just a matter of, the economic cost of bringing those drugs into place and bringing those supplies into place. It's really a situation that requires change leaders like yourself and Team Novo Nordisk. So we thank you for that effort. And on that front, in terms of building further advocacy and awareness regarding diabetes care, what's next for Team Novo Nordisk? I know you mentioned hopefully getting to the Tour de France. What are some of the next major things coming up for Team Novo Nordisk?
Yeah, I mean the next the team is racing this week in Germany. We go next week. We're in China. We're going to continue our advocacy via success in sport on a continual basis. For my situation, we're launching a research partnership with Novo Nordisk. So we're going to begin to be a bit more intelligent with how we collect our data of the athletes while they're training, while they're racing, and see if we can. We've got a really superb medical team like Mike Riddell, Richard Bracken, Miles Fisher, Bruce Bodie, Mark Christensen. Let's see, I think might be it, and then the Team Novo Nordisk medical staff, all working together to see how can we begin to publicize papers of what we do, how we do, so that we can better educate every healthcare professional in the world to be better advisors to their patients, to the people with diabetes who want to go out there and do their first run, their first bike ride, their first bout of exercise. Because there's still, I'm looking in my office now at a picture of our professional team from last year. 16 of 18 of those guys were told they'd never race a bike again because of diabetes. Or 12 of the 18, not 16. 12 of the 18 were told not to race bikes anymore. So there's still doctors out there in the world who are telling patients, people with diabetes, upon diagnosis, that they can't pursue their dreams. Fortunately, a lot of us diabetics, and my wife will vouch for this, are very stubborn. And when you want something, you're going to fight for it, diabetes or not. And I think diabetes only chooses the champions. But these athletes didn't listen to their initial doctor's warnings, and they pursued cycling and have been able to reach it to the professional level. Our junior team now, not one of those kids was told they could never race again. In fact, most of them had showed their diagnosing doctor Team Novo Nordisk before they left the hospital, which is, to me, is really, really cool that the darkest day can be the brightest day for people nowadays, thanks to our social media presence. So, we have to, I think getting all of this research out and getting the data to show just how physically talented people with diabetes can be should be a big inspiration to the healthcare professional community out there, so that they can then know it from a factual standpoint, it's in a white paper, some research journal somewhere, and when it's there, that means it can reach patients out there. I'd like it so that whenever the next generation, the newly diagnosed, are diagnosed, that they immediately know that they can go out and pursue their dreams. Because the diagnosis day for so many people has been so hard, so difficult. It is so difficult no matter what, but it can also be inspiring. And I want that diagnosis day for everyone going forward to be one of the most inspiring days, to where they know that they're part of the coolest team out there, and that's Team Novo Nordisk. And the more research we get out, the more data we get publicized, the more press that we get, the more noise that we make, the faster the world is going to realize that people with diabetes are champions, that people with diabetes deserve to be invested in, and then we can fast track getting access to the best tools, technology, and influence to the people who need it, and that's people with diabetes. Because the tools are out there for every person in the world with diabetes to be the greatest champion they want to be. So we got to ensure that they get those tools, and then they go out living every day as a diabetic, not just to manage diabetes, but to manage their life, their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, and then take care of their diabetes in the background on a continual basis. Because it's when you take care of it, when you dream big, you do amazing things. But when those pieces are missing, then diabetes can be hard, and we want to, it's. I'm not going to lie, it's not an easy disease. It's always there. It's always with you. I've probably checked my blood sugar via my Dexcom here, 4 times during the interview that we've done during this podcast. And that's, I didn't have to prick a finger. So if that's the life that I should live, then that's the life that every person with diabetes should live. And I want to make that the case. Everyone needs to dream and dream big. And if we all do it together, if we all unify together, then this diabetes voice here in the U.S., around the world, together, collectively, we can ensure that every brother and sister we have with diabetes in every corner of the world is unified in the tools that we have to live great lives with diabetes. And until that's done, I will always have work to do. And I really feel that the team, getting to the Tour de France is what will enable that global unification for people with diabetes. That's what will enable, our voice to be the loudest it's ever been. And when we can have the microphone to the world, we're going to talk about the vital need of access, affordable access to the best medications out there, because that's what makes dreams come true. And consequently, it's also what can kill dreams if they don't have it. And we want to be the enabler of dreams in every corner of the world.
I love the message. I love the driving force behind everything you guys are trying to do. And in starting to wrap up, Phil, outside of ensuring access to the technology and the medicine that will empower the hopes and dreams of other people living with T1D, we like to ask sort of a common closing question. Perhaps there was a person who was just recently diagnosed or someone who's been living with T1D that's going through a particular rough patch. What would your message be to that individual and why?
I'd encourage you to find a reason to take control. It's, what is it in life that you want to do? What is it? Do you want to be a good parent? Do you want to be a good grandparent one day? Do you want to run your first 5K? Do you want to ride your first, 100-mile ride? Whatever is out there in life that you want to achieve. And then realize that taking good control of your diabetes is going to enable that to happen. So once you find the light switch and turn it on and walk through that door saying that I'm going to take control, once you walk through that door, then you're there. All you have to do is want to do it and then take the steps needed to do it. But you got to find the reason behind it. And for me, the reason was to be a good athlete. Now, today, the reason is I want to be, I've got 2 children and 2 boys, another that's going to be here any day now. And I want to be around to see their children grow up. I want to be a grandfather, and I want to be around for all of my kids' first steps, all my kids' first races, first competitions. For me, I know that taking good control of my diabetes is what's going to enable those dreams to come true. So for Joe, he wanted to beat me in burrito betting. He wanted me to pay for his dinner one night. So it's all about what's going to help you get motivated to take control, and find that. It could be something simple like a Snickers bar, or it could be something complex like watching your grandkids grow up one day, or being the Supreme Court justice like Justice Sotomayor, or running the country like Theresa May does. It's in the UK. Any dream is possible, but no dream with diabetes is possible unless you take control. So find your dream, whatever it might be, and then check your blood sugar a few more times. Be a little tighter in your diet. Get out there, exercise. Take those small steps to make the dream come true, and enjoy life. Because if you have diabetes, you're in the Champions Club. you're in the Cool Kids Club, and you're on the best team in the world. And we're proud to have you as one of us.
I really love to say that granted you approach it the right way and adopt the right mindset, T1D can be an absolute blessing in disguise. And I think, Phil, you're a classic example of that. And it really is a unique community that you get to be a part of with T1D. So close it up there. I know you're a busy guy, and we wanted to thank you again as an organization, as Game Plan T1D, for all of the work you're doing here and abroad to improve the lives of diabetics and be an inspiration for people living with T1D. So, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, Sam, thank you so much for having me. Look forward to sharing it with our community, and keep up the great work, because you are helping getting inspiring voices to people who need to hear it, and I think you're doing great work, and I'm proud to have you as part of the team as well. My name is Phil Southerland. I have type 1 diabetes, and like all the champions here before me, I too have a game plan.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Game Plan T1D podcast. For related content, please visit www.gameplant1d.com or follow us on social media @GamePlanT1D. Find your game plan.